9. Michelle Combs. Shortly before midnight one evening in 2018, Oklahoma City police responded to a call about an intoxicated person being disruptive at a local bar. Upon arriving, a security guard directed officers to 31-year-old Michelle Combs, who was allegedly being combative with fellow patrons and had refused to leave after being told to do so by staff. A responding officer noted in a report that Combs seemed intoxicated and struggled to provide her ID. According to the report, she also nearly fell into a vehicle when she was asked to stand up. Combs was arrested for public intoxication and was subsequently taken to the local jail. During the drive, she began reciting Bible verses and allegedly offered the transporting officer a certain favor if he let her go. Obviously, he didn't take her up on it, but the local news was evidently happy to report about the offer. 8. Cross-country Kiwi pursuit. In what some media outlets dubbed the world's longest police chase ever, a driver led law enforcement on a nearly 447-mile high-speed pursuit throughout New Zealand's southern island in 2016. Officers first tried to pull over the 20-year-old rogue motorist at around 1 a.m. near the city of Nelson, but he refused. Instead, he took off in his blue Subaru. Police tried to chase after the suspect, but they ended up having to abandon the pursuit 3 times due to safety concerns. After failing to catch him near Nelson, they made another attempt in Christchurch, only to give up and try for a 3rd time. One onlooker told news outlet NZ Stuff that the Subaru sped by so quickly that they knew the police would have no chance of catching up, but the driver eventually ditched the vehicle and attempted to flee on foot. An arrest was then finally made in Waikuaiti at 5 p.m., 16 hours after the first pursuit began. According to police, the suspect was charged with failing to stop for police and driving while disqualified, but he'll likely face more charges as the case progresses in court. 7. Colton Harris Moore. Better known as the Barefoot Bandit for committing his crimes barefoot, Colton Harris Moore was just a kid when he first began breaking into vacation homes and living in the forest for days at a time due to an alleged lack of parental guidance at home. He accrued a lengthy criminal record at a young age, with each conviction being accompanied by community service or a short stay at a juvenile detention center. His crimes began mostly as petty thefts, but he evolved into more severe acts over time. Moore became a fugitive from justice in 2008 when he walked out of a halfway house to avoid serving a 3-year sentence. It would have been his first experience with serving a substantial amount of time for his ever-expanding list of crimes, which would grow to include dozens of suspected thefts in Washington, Idaho, and Canada. In his efforts to evade the law, Moore stole every method of transportation imaginable: bicycles, cars, speedboats, and even 2 planes, despite having no flying experience. He tried flying his first stolen Cessna after reading manuals on how to pilot small aircraft, and he ended up crashing it. Luckily for him though, he survived. In 2010, Moore stole a second plane in Bloomington, Indiana. He somehow managed to fly it to the Bahamas, where he survived another rough landing and proceeded to rob several properties. Meanwhile, a federal judge issued an indictment against him for a slew of crimes. And the FBI offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Moore was finally arrested about a week later after police shot out the engine of a stolen motorboat he was driving. He was then extradited to the US, where he pleaded guilty to 7 counts and received a prison sentence of more than 7 years. The young offender was paroled in 2016 and got a job doing clerical work for his defense lawyer. And since then, he's managed to stay largely out of news headlines, which likely means that he's also been staying out of trouble. He briefly ran a blog voicing his support for Donald Trump, but eventually it was taken down, likely due to backlash. 6. James Matt French. In March of 2023, Sergeant Chris Skinner of the Oklahoma City Police Department pulled over a captain from the same agency named James Matt French on suspicion of driving while intoxicated. Skinner reportedly enacted the traffic stop at around 1:30 a.m. after noticing that French's vehicle appeared to be swerving, speeding, and failing to use turn signals. According to a report, French's eyes were watery and his speech was slurred. Body cam footage of the encounter also showed French telling officers that he was the police captain and repeatedly asking one of the officers to turn off his camera. In fact, he even commanded the officer to turn the device off. Sergeant Skinner refused to obey the order despite French's repeated requests, which eventually took an overtone of sheer beggary. Then, at one point during the video, Skinner said, "I don't care if you're a gangbanger or the President of the United States." And he went on to point out that if he gave French special treatment, it would reflect poorly upon his own integrity as a police officer. After being asked several times about how much he had to drink, French eventually admitted to having 3 or 4 beers while playing poker. He also acknowledged that it wasn't smart for him to get behind the wheel, but claimed he was only coming from a few blocks away. French continued asking Skinner to turn off his body cam while performing poorly on a field sobriety test. And when simply saying no failed to get the captain to stop asking, Skinner reminded him that it was the department's policy for officers to keep their cameras on. Still though, French persisted, at which point Skinner made it clear that he planned to stand by the oath he took to uphold the law. Towards the end of the footage, French asked Skinner if he was going to be arrested. Skinner replied with a simple yes and took the captain into custody on a DUI charge. And according to the most recent update on the case, French was on administrative leave pending the results of an internal investigation. 5. Elisa Bajraterovich. Some people go out of their way not to avoid their own arrest, but to prevent a loved one from being arrested. Such was the case for a fit female NYPD officer from the Bronx named Elisa Bajraterovich, who was accused of trying to stop detectives from searching her boyfriend in April 2023. According to police, the 33-year-old and her beau were pulled over on a Saturday night. Elisa allegedly tried to use her status as a cop to get them off the hook, and she caused a scene when it didn't work. Following the incident, the New York Post reported that the couple met while working out at a gym. A source told the news outlet that Elisa's colleagues warned her to stay away from her partner because he was under investigation as a suspected drug dealer. In fact, detectives had reportedly been keeping an eye on the man for some time, but Elisa apparently didn't listen, and she's now suspected of trying to prevent her unnamed boyfriend from getting in trouble on the night they were pulled over. According to police, the cops who pulled the pair over were planning to search their vehicle due to Elisa's boyfriend's suspected status as a major player in the drug trade. The off-duty officer immediately attempted to intervene, even before the officers who were conducting the stop knew who she was. A source later claimed that Elisa gave the cops a hard time and refused to follow their commands, to the point where they were compelled to call for backup assistance. As a result, her guns were taken away and she was reassigned to desk duty pending the outcome of an investigation. She'd been on the force for 11 years when the controversy first made headlines. Ironically, Elisa's boyfriend was let go after the traffic stop, but her behavior was so suspicious that it landed her in hot water. It's unclear whether the officers who pulled the couple over ended up searching their vehicle, or if they were too distracted by Elisa's alleged tantrum to stick to the original plan. 4. Brent Christopher Heath. In today's Florida Man installment, a 40-year-old Palm Coast resident named Brent Christopher Heath allegedly faked a heart attack in an attempt to get out of being arrested on suspicion of several drug-related counts. The incident in question happened during what was meant to be a routine traffic stop in August 2023. According to a police report, a Flagler County deputy enacted the stop just after midnight. Then, after continuing to drive despite the deputy sounding his lights and sirens for more than a minute, Heath finally pulled over. He allegedly claimed that he failed to stop immediately because his back windows were too dark to see out of, and he didn't notice he was being pulled over. The deputy smelled the distinct odor of marijuana emanating from the vehicle and established that he had probable cause to search the car. He then proceeded to find THC and fentanyl in the vehicle. As a 29-time convicted felon, Heath is no stranger to the law. In fact, he'd been released from federal prison just months before the traffic stop. But he was apparently in no mood to be arrested that day, and at some point during the conversation he claimed he was having a heart attack. Unable to determine whether the suspect was suffering from a legitimate medical emergency, deputies summoned an ambulance to the scene. Heath was taken to a nearby hospital, but it didn't spare him from facing the legal consequences of his alleged crimes. After being medically cleared, he was booked into custody on multiple drug possession and trafficking-related counts. And his case appears to be ongoing. 3. David Flores. After identifying a man named David Flores as the top suspect in a shooting that occurred months earlier, a team from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department went to his home in Albuquerque in August 2023 and tried to arrest him. But Flores had other ideas, none of which included being voluntarily taken into custody. He allegedly refused to leave the residence, resulting in an hours-long standoff with a SWAT team. According to the Bernalillo County District Attorney, Flores was seen wearing traditional male clothing inside the apartment, but when he finally exited the building, he appeared to be wearing a long-haired wig, makeup, and feminine clothing. He'd also allegedly taken measures to cover up his tattoos as part of his effort to disguise himself. In a statement, the DA claimed that Flores even tried pretending to be a different person, telling the SWAT team that the real suspect was still inside the building. As you've likely already guessed though, the ruse didn't work, and Flores was taken into custody on one count of aggravated assault with a firearm and failing to appear in court for a separate drug-related case. 2. Drunk driver tries blaming dog. Nobody likes being pulled over by the police, and on some level, it may even be natural for a driver to automatically start trying to think of excuses they might use to try talking their way out of an arrest or a ticket. And it's likely fair to assume that any seasoned police officer has heard every excuse in the book. But one Colorado driver pulled a first when he tried switching places with his dog during a traffic stop in 2023. According to a report, the motorist was pulled over in Springfield after an officer observed the vehicle traveling at 52 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. In a statement, the Springfield Police Department wrote that the driver tried to switch places with his dog, who was in the passenger seat, as the arresting officer approached the vehicle and watched the entire time. The driver then exited the vehicle from the passenger side and told the officer that he wasn't driving. He allegedly showed clear signs of intoxication and attempted to run away when the officer asked how much he'd had to drink that evening. But the suspect made it just 60 feet on foot before being taken down. According to the police department, the man had gotten lost in Springfield while driving between two other cities. In addition to being arrested on suspicion of driving while intoxicated, he had 2 active warrants out for his arrest in connection to an unrelated case. After being medically cleared, he was booked into custody on multiple charges, including driving under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs, driving under suspension, driving while ability impaired, speeding 20 to 24 miles per hour over the speed limit, and resisting arrest. And according to a Facebook post, the dog was let off with a warning and was placed into the custody of a trusted acquaintance. 1. Lydia Elizabeth Badillo. During a routine traffic stop in April 2023, Texas State Police caught a driver trying to smuggle 2 Mexican women into the United States. According to a report, troopers in Jim Hogg County pulled over a gold Chevy Malibu being driven by a woman named Lydia Elizabeth Badillo. Bodycam footage of the conversation showed Badillo saying that she was heading out for drinks with the 2 women, who she claimed were her friends. As a trooper ran the trio's driver's licenses through the system, Badillo allegedly tried to distract him by flirting with him. She then told the trooper that she was looking at his eyes because he was pretty handsome, but it wasn't enough to derail him from the task at hand. Badillo, a Mexican national living in the US, eventually admitted to picking up the two women at a people smuggling stash house in the city of Mission. She also admitted to trying to smuggle them into the country. According to police, both of the suspects' passengers were migrants from El Salvador who were attempting to pass through the border checkpoint using fake driver's licenses. But they were caught, and Badillo was charged with human smuggling.
Number 8. Kevin Mattingly. During what began as a routine traffic stop for rolling through an intersection in Summerfield, Florida in September 2021, a police K9 alerted to the possible presence of narcotics in 26-year-old Kevin Dalton Mattingly's car. When Marion County deputies instructed Mattingly to exit the vehicle, he put the car in drive and sped off along a highway, reaching speeds as high as 110 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. Then, after chasing the suspect for 7 miles, deputies called off the pursuit for safety reasons. However, they caught up with Mattingly nearly 2 weeks later and booked him into jail on a fleeing and eluding charge. Mattingly bonded out for $10,000 and accrued at least one felony warrant over the next several months. In February 2022, deputies responded to a 911 hang-up call at a residence in Umatilla and found Mattingly's car parked outside. As they approached the property with a K9, they spotted Mattingly outside. He allegedly tried to flee in a pickup truck and resisted fiercely as deputies pulled him out of the vehicle. And while being transported to the Marion County Jail, Mattingly repeatedly asked one of the cops to throw away a bag of methamphetamine they'd found in his pocket. He offered to let the deputy keep a large wad of cash that the drugs were found with in exchange for trashing the meth, and he even tried reassuring the deputy that he wouldn't get in trouble for honoring the request. Of course, the deputy refused, and Mattingly earned himself a bribery charge on top of any other allegations he was already facing. Number 7. Sean Sheridan. After striking a plea deal for shooting his former fiancée in the neck, 34-year-old Sean Sheridan failed to show up for his sentencing hearing in July 2023. The victim survived, but was paralyzed for months amid an ongoing road to recovery. Sheridan was facing 12 years in the New York State prison system when he skipped bail, triggering a large-scale manhunt. 3 weeks later, a state trooper's K9 was shot while he searched in the Downerville State Forest near the town of Russell. The trooper returned fire, fatally striking Sheridan in the face. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and the police K9 survived. In a statement, the state police said that their goal was to take Sheridan into custody without incident, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. Sheridan had been living in a tent in the forest for nearly a month with his 19-year-old girlfriend, Chantel Myatt, who'd been reported missing 2 weeks earlier. According to police, both Sheridan and Myatt were heavily camouflaged when they were found, with Myatt wearing a ghillie suit and Sheridan heavily armed. Myatt told local station WWNY that she didn't know her boyfriend was a fugitive. She admitted that she went into the woods with Sheridan, but claimed that she initially believed they were simply on a camping trip. The couple survived off wild animals that they trapped, according to Myatt, who said she'd boiled a possum for dinner the night before the shootout with police. As the couple's time in the wilderness dragged on, Myatt became suspicious about why they were really out there. But when she questioned Sheridan, he allegedly claimed that he was just enjoying himself so much that he didn't want to return to society. Myatt extended the benefit of the doubt for as long as she could, only to realize that she didn't really have a choice about whether or not to go home. She became scared to walk away, and at some point during the trip, she discovered she was pregnant with Sheridan's child. When the couple awoke to the sound of a helicopter overhead one morning, they moved their campsite. Then, shortly thereafter, Myatt heard someone aggressively call her boyfriend's name. As she ran away from Sheridan, she heard 3 gunshots, and by the time she turned around and looked in Sheridan's direction, he was lying on the ground with a gunshot wound to the head. Myatt admittedly became afraid of Sheridan during their time in the woods. Despite this, though, she said that she wants people to know that he wasn't a demon, but a very scared soul who didn't know where his life was going and just wanted some sort of control of it. For obvious reasons, there's a good chance that few people will take a similarly sympathetic view, and while resorting to deadly force is never ideal, Sheridan sealed his fate the moment he decided to shoot at a cop. Number 6. Samuel Hartman. 39-year-old Samuel Hartman was 9 years into serving a life sentence for attacking his stepdaughter when he escaped from an Arkansas prison in August of 2022. He was working in a field with other inmates when a truck with 2 women in it pulled up. The women, who were later identified as Hartman's wife, Misty Hartman, and her mother, Linda Annette White, allegedly began shooting at the other prisoners while Hartman rushed into the truck. With officers in pursuit, the truck sped to the bank of the Mississippi River, where 2 jet skis had been placed ahead of time. The trio then fled across the river and ditched the machines on the Mississippi side. They remained on the run for over a year, while investigators followed up on hundreds of leads. After discovering that Hartman's mother-in-law had ties to West Virginia, law enforcement eventually tracked down the fugitives at a hotel in Lewisburg. They arrested the Hartmans, Linda White, and White's boyfriend, Rodney Trent. A photo taken during the arrest showed Hartman's face covered in blood, but it's unclear how he sustained the injuries. Hartman was returned to prison to serve his life sentence, and everyone else involved is facing charges for assisting and/or harboring the escapee. Number 5. Matthew Mannix. After learning that he was wanted in Colorado for crimes he swears he didn't commit, including an alleged kidnapping, 35-year-old Matthew Mannix flew to Las Vegas to avoid facing the charges. He later told local station KTNV that he planned to survive by making money playing poker. But Mannix got kicked out of the first hotel he stayed at, and instead of returning to Colorado and facing the allegations against him, he slept on the roof of a parking garage and continued gambling. He met a woman named Anna at a casino, and they got a room at Caesar's Palace. Then, less than 4 days into the trip, Mannix devolved into a drug-induced rampage. By his own admission, he was high on weed, kratom, methamphetamine, and other stimulants when the meltdown occurred. He didn't remember what happened, but everyone who witnessed it will likely never forget it. According to a police report, Mannix held his new lady friend hostage in their 21st floor hotel room while claiming that he was armed and threatening to kill anyone who tried entering the room. Mannix said that the woman was in the room willingly, while crisis negotiators reported seeing her make a dash for the door, only to be body slammed by Mannix during her attempt to escape. He also allegedly threatened to cut the woman's tongue out if she tried to communicate with law enforcement. A drone captured footage of Mannix smoking from what appeared to be a meth pipe during the standoff, and authorities described both the fugitive and his female hostage as extremely high to the point of paranoia. The pair were also seen having intercourse, despite the crisis at hand. The hotel was on lockdown for 5 hours as police and SWAT teams surrounded the building, and at some point Mannix began throwing furniture through the window, prompting an evacuation of the pool area below. He caused over $50,000 worth of damages to the hotel, which he's since agreed to pay back. After Mannix was finally taken into custody, the woman who was with him claimed she wanted to leave the room, but that he threatened to throw her out of the window if she tried. Mannix took a deal and pleaded guilty to felony property destruction and misdemeanor negligence charges in exchange for getting several more serious charges dropped. He faces 1 to 5 years in prison in Nevada and is scheduled to be sentenced in September 2023. After the hearing, he'll be extradited to Colorado to face his criminal cases there. Number 4. Jeremy Wood. 41-year-old Jeremy Wood was wanted on multiple parole violations, including possession of methamphetamine and failing to appear in court when investigators traced him to a home in Evansville, Indiana in August 2023. Police and U.S. Marshals surrounded the residence and evacuated the rest of the household members, but Wood hid in the attic and refused to come out. For several hours, negotiators tried getting Wood to exit the home by broadcasting messages to him on loudspeakers, and in the meantime, deputies applied for a warrant to use more aggressive measures. After issuing multiple warnings with no response from Wood, law enforcement deployed gas into the home in an effort to force him out. He then peacefully surrendered a few minutes later. This wasn't the first time Wood made news headlines for an arrest. Back in 2017, he was accused of trying to shoplift several blocks of cheese from a supermarket by stuffing them into his pants. He's currently behind bars while awaiting his next court date for his current case. Number 3. Terran Green. Whenever possible, SWAT teams avoid resorting to aggressive and deadly tactics. But sometimes law enforcement has no other choice. One such situation occurred in Harris County, Texas in August 2023, when a 34-year-old suspected cop shooter named Terran Green refused to exit the house where he was hiding. The manhunt for Green began the previous day after he allegedly shot Sheriff's Deputy Joseph Anderson during a routine traffic stop, and afterward, he fled the scene. At the time, Green had outstanding warrants for jumping bond on charges of aggravated assault of a family member and being a felon in possession of a firearm. He also has a lengthy criminal history, which includes 3 previous prison stints. During the 24-hour manhunt that ensued, Green's family members worked closely with law enforcement in hopes of bringing the situation to a peaceful end. The fleeing fugitive was ultimately traced to a non-relative's house, where he allegedly shot 2 U.S. Marshals and 1 Harris County deputy as they approached the residence. Miraculously, all 4 members of law enforcement who were struck by gunfire throughout the ordeal survived their injuries. An hours-long standoff ensued, lasting into the night while Green remained barricaded in the house. Meanwhile, 2 armored vehicles could be seen circling the home, as well as a drone and a robotic dog. Harrowing footage showed the vehicles ramming into the house and using a hydraulic arm to gouge large holes into the second floor. Police could also be seen deploying gas into the residence in an attempt to force Green out. Witnesses later described the scene as resembling something out of an action movie. He finally relented just before midnight and crawled onto the hydraulic arm that had been puncturing holes into the house. Green was then lowered to the ground, where a team was waiting with their rifles pointed. Thankfully, though, he was taken into custody without any further violence. He faces 4 charges of attempted capital murder, and if convicted, he'll face 25 to 99 years in prison. He's currently being held without bail while he awaits his next court date. Green's cousin, Arnacia Ulrich, told Fox 26 that the family was shocked and heartbroken to learn of Green's suspected crimes. She extended the family's sorrow and sympathy toward the officers who were shot and their families, and she commended law enforcement for handling the situation with utmost professionalism. Ulrich also acknowledged the impact of the incident on the community and hoped for healing to come now that Green is in custody. Number 2. Isaac Morales. While investigating reports of suspicious activity at a hotel in Westbrook, Maine in August 2023, agents from the state's Drug Enforcement Agency uncovered evidence indicating that someone was dealing drugs out of one of the rooms. After obtaining a warrant, they searched a room shared by a 38-year-old Texas man named Isaac Morales, his girlfriend, and 2 children. Inside the room, agents found nearly a half-pound of crystal meth, 3.2 ounces of cocaine powder and crack, 1.3 ounces of heroin, as well as packing materials and cash that's believed to be the profits from drug sales. And altogether, the drugs were estimated to have a street value of $40,000. At the time of his arrest in Maine, Morales was already a wanted man in Texas on 3 outstanding warrants for drug-related charges, human trafficking, and smuggling persons. He now also faces charges in Maine for aggravated trafficking of methamphetamine and being a fugitive from justice. Morales is being held without bond in Maine while he addresses his legal issues there. But once the case is squared away, he'll most likely be extradited to Texas to face his charges there. Number 1. Wayne Parker. In October 2022, a 35-year-old farmer/scammer from Suffolk, England, named Wayne Parker was found guilty of defrauding several victims out of nearly $1 million. According to records, Parker opened lines of credit with animal suppliers and veterinarians and maxed them out with no apparent plans to repay the debts. He failed to appear in court for sentencing in February 2023 and continued to elude authorities for the next 6 months. Authorities said that Parker made multiple promises to return to Suffolk to face the music in court, but he repeatedly failed to live up to his word. Parker is currently still at large, but investigators made a major breakthrough in August 2023, when he was spotted on Match.com. The discovery has helped investigators start to narrow down his whereabouts, and they've also found records of Parker hiring cars in what appears to be an attempt to avoid detection by police. His decision to look for love could very well prove to be his undoing, as detectives work diligently to follow his trail. In a previous case dating back to 2020, Parker allegedly failed to properly dispose of livestock remains. He was also moving large numbers of animals without keeping proper records or following the legal standards for doing so. Authorities prosecuted him for posing a serious risk of spreading bovine tuberculosis and imposed a 12-week jail sentence, followed by an 18-month ban from conducting business in the industry.
9. Russia's Rambo. Alexander Bychkov was born to a family of criminals in Russia's Kostroma region during the early 1950s. They had been exiled to the area during the Stalin era. As a young adult, Bychkov worked in the forestry industry. After the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s and plunged into an economic downturn, he purposely disappeared to avoid paying alimony to his wife. Bychkov was presumed dead in 1997, but he was actually living as a recluse in a nature reserve. He repurposed a disused forestry station as his home, hunted animals for food, and only left the woods during the summer, since leaving footprints in the snow would make him easy to follow. In his shack, he kept an arsenal of weapons, along with animal traps and wilderness survival books. Unlike some people who retreat into the wilderness to live on their own terms, Bychkov was not a peaceful hermit. He actually terrorized locals. And the fact that he was 6 feet 7 inches, 2 meters tall, only made him all the more terrifying. Over a 20-year period, he allegedly burned down as many as 30 vacation homes. Bychkov also held a police officer captive at gunpoint, and on another occasion, he trapped 3 government officials and released them under the threat that he would kill them if they returned. His antics earned him the nickname of Russia's Rambo among law enforcement and the local community. Parents even made their kids walk their dogs to school for protection, just in case they crossed paths with Bychkov. In 2008, law enforcement decided to put a stop to the hermit's intimidating behavior. In a carefully orchestrated attempt to arrest Bychkov, 6 specially trained cops and 4 park rangers chased after him on snowmobiles. But things didn't go as planned, and a shootout ensued between Bychkov and the police. He died in the exchange of gunfire, bringing his decades-long reign of terror to an unfortunate but necessary end. 8. Benny Wint. 29-year-old Benny Wint was about to get married when he vanished off Daytona Beach, Florida in 1989. His panicked fiancée thought he had drowned, but police found it suspicious that his body never turned up. At the time, Wint was involved in a large drug ring out of South Carolina. In addition to his fear that someone was out to kill him, he was paranoid that he was wanted by law enforcement in connection to his activities. He destroyed all his identifying documents and quietly relocated to North Carolina, where he lived under the alias William James Sweet. Over the next 20 years, Wint lived a quiet and inconspicuous life. He found a new partner, raised a son, and had no contact with anyone from his past, including a daughter he left behind in Florida. During a routine traffic stop for having a light out on his car in 2009, Wint was unable to provide the police with any form of ID. A search of the name he was going by proved that William Sweet didn't exist. He eventually admitted his real name, and he had done such a good job destroying his past identity that law enforcement was initially unable to find his records. Wint was booked under the name John Doe until authorities were able to confirm his identity. In reality, Wint was not wanted on any charges stemming from his past activities. He was charged with giving police a fake name, but that was all. Shortly after the story broke, authorities said that they had found no reason to charge Wint for faking his own death. His new family had no idea of his real identity before then, so it must have come as a surprise for them to learn that he was not who he said he was. When the press started coming around, Wint made it clear that he was unwilling to grant interviews unless he was paid, and he hung up no trespassing signs around his property. 7. Olivia Taylor Washik. In April 2021, Olivia Taylor Washik, a 28-year-old Florida woman, made news headlines for allegedly offering lap dances to random strangers and then asking cops if they wanted to bang. Officers encountered the visibly intoxicated young woman on the sidewalk while responding to a call about a disturbance outside a bar in St. Petersburg. According to a report, Taylor Washik was stumbling, her speech was slurred, and her eyes were bloodshot. She also struggled to stand on flat ground. The report stated that the police called paramedics to the scene to evaluate the woman, but they were unable to because she allegedly threatened to punch the emergency responders if they touched her. Authorities claimed that Taylor Washik had multiple opportunities to call someone to help her get home, or even to have a police officer walk her to her apartment building, but she reportedly continued to cause a disturbance by yelling profanities at people nearby and talking dirty at the cops. According to the report, Taylor Washik also yelled that the police were going to shoot her. She was charged with disorderly intoxication. 6. Kyle Grabowski. In 2011, 26-year-old Kyle Grabowski was sentenced to 10 years in a Canadian prison for a string of crimes, including a violent home invasion that had occurred in 2009. During the crime, Grabowski and at least 3 other suspects entered a home armed with guns and bats. They tied up their victims, including a young woman who later accused her captors of beating her and demanding to know where her brother was. Prosecutors claimed that the burglary was committed over a drug debt, while Grabowski's lawyer argued that it was an act of revenge in retaliation for an assault on his father. Just a few months earlier, Grabowski had been charged with stabbing one of 3 men he got into a physical altercation with at a bar. He also had drug and gun-related charges. Grabowski was released from prison in 2019 after serving 2/3 of his sentence. 2 years later, in December 2021, he was caught drinking at a bar despite being on parole and under specific instructions not to be near alcohol. After crossing paths with an officer outside, he went back into the bar and left through a back door. Police caught up with him on foot. In addition to drinking when he wasn't supposed to be, Grabowski had 14 grams, 0.5 ounces of cocaine in his possession. Enough to charge him with possession for the purpose of trafficking. He allegedly offered the police $10,000 to make the drugs go away. But they turned down the bribe. The parole board revoked Grabowski's release. Shortly after being freed again in early 2023, Grabowski was one of 4 people who were arrested in a series of raids by Montreal police. He faces 7 gun-related counts and 1 marijuana charge, and remains behind bars pending the outcome of his case. 5. Katie Lynn Duncan. While responding to a report of a family fight in Newcastle, Indiana, late at night in May 2023, police encountered a woman who was acting disruptive and uncooperative at the scene. Identified by law enforcement as 31-year-old Katie Lynn Duncan, the suspect allegedly had a blood alcohol content of 0.2. It's more than twice the legal limit for driving, and definitely enough to qualify a person as being drunk. According to police, Duncan resisted being taken into custody and even offered to pay the cops $2,000 just to let her go. An officer wrote that he advised Duncan to stop trying to bribe them. The report also noted that the young woman cut her hand on broken glass during her struggle with the police. After receiving treatment at a local hospital, where she allegedly yelled and swore at staff members and officers, she was booked into the Henry County Jail on suspicion of felony bribery. She was also charged with misdemeanor counts of resisting law enforcement, disorderly conduct, and possession of marijuana. If convicted on the bribery charge alone, Duncan could face up to 6 years in prison. According to the most recent update on the case, she was being held on $14,000 bond while awaiting her next court date. 4. John Sung Park. 29-year-old John Sung Park vanished while spearfishing with friends off California's Laguna Beach in 2008. His friends filed a missing persons report. When a search failed to turn up any sign of Park, authorities initially assumed his body had gotten trapped underwater. But they began to suspect he was still alive when they took a closer look at his circumstances in the time leading up to his disappearance. The day before he went missing, Park sold his car. He slipped out of sight just 4 days before he was scheduled to be sentenced for state felony charges of drug possession, forgery, burglary, and receiving stolen property. Park was also wanted on a warrant for a drug-related charge out of Los Angeles County. 2 weeks after he vanished, Park allegedly returned to the home of the woman he sold his car to and stole the vehicle back, most likely using a spare key that he had held onto. He was accused of hitting the woman's daughter with the car while she tried to block him from driving it away, and authorities issued an arrest warrant. They also spoke with Park's friends, who continued to insist that they knew nothing of his whereabouts, and that they had truly believed he disappeared in the water. Park was located in 2009 when he was caught cheating during a card game at a casino in Las Vegas. He was taken into custody with plans to extradite him to California to face his charges, but the outcome of the case is unclear. 3. Cameron Gray. While working a routine traffic checkpoint in Coweta County, Georgia one evening in August 2023, a deputy caught a strong whiff of marijuana coming from the direction of a gray Nissan Rogue. In Georgia, that counts as a probable cause to search a vehicle. So the deputy pulled the driver over. The man behind the wheel, identified by law enforcement as 21-year-old Cameron Gray, almost immediately began begging the deputy to let him go. He said his wife was pregnant, and when that failed to get him a pass, he said he had just gotten out of work. But the deputy remained intent on searching the vehicle. In body cam footage of the traffic stop, he could be heard telling Gray that if he didn't get out of the car voluntarily, the deputy would smash the window and drag him out. Gray remained seated in the car and said he was calling his wife. While he used his phone, a deputy reached his hand through the window. Instead of complying with orders to exit the vehicle, Gray said, "Don't reach in my car." Apparently fed up with playing nice, deputies smashed the window and tried pulling Gray out of the vehicle. In the video, Gray could be heard accusing the cops of punching him in the face and saying, "I haven't done anything wrong." He sped off, allegedly dragging 2 deputies for a short distance. Law enforcement chased after Gray and eventually caught up to him. Inside his car, they found a loaded Glock handgun that had been reported stolen in Atlanta, 2 magazines, a few dozen 9mm rounds, clear plastic baggies, a black scale with residue on it, a rolled paper that appeared to be a burned joint, a marijuana pipe, a ski mask, and a pair of gloves. Gray was charged with aggravated assault and fleeing, attempting to elude a police officer. 2. Kristen Allen Wright. After learning in 2023 that he was facing several serious assault-related felonies in El Mirage, Arizona, for an alleged incident that happened 6 years earlier in 2017, 38-year-old Kristen Allen Wright was determined to avoid being taken into custody. As a court date for his case approached in March, he cut off his ankle monitor and fled the state. He gave the ankle monitor to a friend who took it to a hospital and informed his family of his death while posing as a nurse. An acquaintance informed local law enforcement of Wright's supposed death, but authorities were unable to confirm that it had actually happened. Suspecting that Wright may have faked his death, they launched an investigation into the claim that he had passed away at a nearby hospital. It wasn't long before they tracked him down in Clark County, Indiana, where he was alive and well. A SWAT team arrested him at a residence in Sellersburg, and he was extradited to Arizona to face the assault allegations in court. 1. Richard Che. During the early morning hours one day in February 2010, Police in Colma, California, pulled over a lawyer named Richard Che on suspicion of driving drunk. At the time, the 37-year-old already had 2 DUI convictions under his belt, and he was apparently so desperate to avoid another one that he offered the police $900 cash out of his pocket to make this all go away. The cops rejected the offer, so Che increased the amount he was willing to give to $5,000. He ultimately offered law enforcement as much as $35,000 in exchange for letting him off the hook. But the police were unmoved by Che's pleas, and they booked him into custody on suspicion of bribery and driving while intoxicated. His blood alcohol level was 0.15, nearly twice the legal limit for driving. A jury convicted Che of misdemeanor drunk driving, but they were deadlocked when it came to the bribery charge. He underwent a retrial and was convicted of both charges the second time around. Che was sentenced to 8 months in jail, followed by 3 years of probation. He was also ordered to abstain from alcohol, undergo drug testing, and complete a multiple offender program. The judge also fined Che $2,300 and banned him from owning weapons or ammunition.
Number 9. Yvette Lares Garcia. During a routine traffic stop in Gladstone, Oregon in November 2021, Officer Clement Lau discovered that 37-year-old Yvette Lares Garcia was wanted on a felony theft warrant out of Texas, where she was accused of embezzling over $1 million. Garcia was cooperative and polite throughout the arrest, but she repeatedly mentioned that her dogs were at home and had nobody to care for them while she was in custody. With no other option but to take the dogs to a shelter while Garcia dealt with her legal issues, the police drove her to her apartment so she could help leash them. They leashed one of the dogs right away, but the other one ran upstairs. Garcia and Sergeant Travis Hill went upstairs after the dog, while Officer Lau stayed downstairs with the leash dog. The suspect was handcuffed behind her back, but she managed to grab a gun from somewhere in her bedroom while Hill was distracted by the dog. As they went downstairs, Garcia shot Hill in the arm and leg. Lau shot back and struck Garcia in the torso. He ordered her to drop her weapon, but she repeatedly refused, saying that she wasn't going back to jail, and continued firing at the cops. She was finally taken into custody with help from backup officers. Sergeant Hill suffered permanent injuries that forced him into early retirement. Garcia received a 10-year sentence in Oregon for attempted aggravated murder. After serving her time, she'll be extradited to Texas to face the embezzlement charge. Number 8. Rocco Morabito. For 23 years, Rocco Morabito was one of Italy's most wanted crime bosses. The high-ranking member of the notorious Calabrian 'Ndrangheta syndicate went on the run in 1994, using a fake Brazilian passport to avoid facing justice for attempting to smuggle nearly a ton of cocaine into Italy. In 2001, he was sentenced in absentia to 30 years in prison. Morabito, also known as the Cocaine King of Milan, was located in Uruguay in 2017 after he tried enrolling his daughter in school using his real name. He had been living in the country's capital, Montevideo, under the alias Francisco Capoletto. A search of Morabito's properties turned up 13 cell phones, a dozen bank cards, $50,000 cash, jewels, a handgun, and multiple passport-sized photos of him sporting different disguises. Despite the suspicious finds, his lawyer claimed that his client had been living a respectable and legal lifestyle since he went on the run. Morabito spent the next 2 years in a Uruguayan prison while awaiting extradition to Italy. The 53-year-old managed to escape justice yet again in 2019 when he and 3 other inmates escaped through a hole in the building's roof. Authorities recaptured Morabito in Brazil in 2021, and this time they made sure he didn't escape custody. He was extradited to Italy the following year to begin serving his decades-long sentence. Number 7. Xavier Michael Babadar. Better known by his nickname Chiefsaholic, Xavier Michael Babadar was a fixture at Kansas City Chiefs games where he cheered the team on in a wolf mask. He gained both local and internet fame for the unusual get-up, and because he was so frequently seen in the stands that even the team noticed when he wasn't there. Tickets to some of the games and events that Babadar attended are known to sell for thousands of dollars. Some of his social media followers questioned how he afforded it, especially because he was so young. The 28-year-old claimed that he became successful through good old-fashioned hard work and that he managed multiple warehouses throughout the Midwest. But that was a lie, and when Babadar failed to show up for a Chiefs game in December 2022, bits and pieces of the truth began to come out. Babadar missed the game because he was arrested for allegedly robbing a bank in Oklahoma. In fact, he was suspected of robbing banks and credit unions in multiple states, including Iowa, Tennessee, and Nebraska. Detectives connected Babadar to the previous robberies through bank records, casino records, and his cell phone locations when the crimes were committed. According to prosecutors, he laundered over $1 million in dirty money at casinos over an 8-month period. He lived out of his car throughout his multi-state crime spree, and by the time he was arrested for the Oklahoma bank robbery, all his ill-gotten money appeared to be gone. While out on bond in early 2023, Babadar cut off his ankle monitor and went on the run. He failed to show up for his next court date and managed to evade law enforcement for 4 months before being captured outside Sacramento. Babadar faces 19 charges, including 3 counts of armed bank robbery, 1 count of bank theft, 11 counts of money laundering, and 4 counts of transporting stolen property across state lines. Number 6. Gregory Conrath. In 2014, a woman contacted deputies in Miami County, Indiana, with tape recordings detailing her boyfriend's plan to murder his ex-wife, Anna. As a respected orthopedic surgeon who worked at a local hospital, 48-year-old Gregory Conrath was an unlikely suspect. But the evidence spoke for itself. In the recordings, Conrath could be heard describing how he specifically chose bullets that would inflict maximum damage to Anna's head. He also admitted that he had already gone to a shooting range to practice shooting his gun, and he asked his girlfriend to provide him with an alibi by claiming they were together at the time of Anna's murder. During a search of Conrath's residence, police found evidence indicating that he was serious about putting his plan into action. Conrath pleaded guilty to a reduced stalking charge and received an 8-year suspended prison sentence, along with 1 year of house arrest. He was also ordered to surrender his passport and not to contact his ex-wife. Just 2 weeks later, Conrath cut off his ankle bracelet and tossed it out his car window while driving. He was captured in Arizona 2 days later. In addition to violating the terms of his house arrest, Conrath allegedly tried contacting his ex-wife and had passport photos taken, indicating that he planned on securing another passport. His suspended 8-year sentence was revoked, and he was sentenced to an additional year for an escape charge. The judge overseeing the case accused Conrath of thumbing his nose at the system. In handing down the prison sentence, he explained that he didn't think Conrath had any plans whatsoever to follow the rules that were put forth by the court. Number 5. Donald Lee Cooper Jr. 28-year-old Donald Lee Cooper Jr. was wanted in connection with a fatal shooting in North Dakota when he led U.S. Marshals on a high-speed chase in Wisconsin in 2020. The pursuit lasted for several miles and reached speeds of 90 miles per hour. It finally ended when Cooper blew through a red light and collided with another car, killing 23-year-old Joseph Badora and 20-year-old Maria Bueller. Cooper tried to flee the scene on foot but was quickly captured. In addition to the charges out of North Dakota, Cooper was charged in Wisconsin with 2 counts of reckless homicide, eluding police resulting in death, and driving with a suspended license resulting in death. He was convicted of both reckless homicide counts and received a maximum prison sentence of 25 years. In a surprising twist, a North Dakota jury acquitted Cooper of all charges stemming from the shooting he was wanted for when he attempted to elude capture, including attempted murder, accomplice to murder, and reckless endangerment and terrorizing. After dealing with the case, he was sent back to Wisconsin to continue serving his 25-year sentence. Number 4. Blaine and Susan Barksdale. 72-year-old Frank Bly was nowhere to be found when his home in Tucson, Arizona burst into flames one night in 2019. Also missing from the property were one of his vehicles and dozens of guns. One of the last people to see Bly before he vanished was his good friend, 58-year-old Susan Barksdale, and her husband Blaine. Susan told investigators that she had no knowledge of Bly's whereabouts or the circumstances of his disappearance. The senior citizen's vehicle was found abandoned along a roadside the following day. Bloodstains in the trunk would later be identified through DNA as belonging to Bly. Several days later, Susan Barksdale's daughter called authorities and reported that her mother had fled the area in a hurry. The young woman was worried that Susan was in danger and said that Blaine had a history of being abusive. By the time police visited the couple's home several hours away, they had indeed gone on the run, leaving behind their vehicles, pets, and most of their personal belongings. A search of their cell phones led detectives to Blaine's nephew, Brent Mallard, who admitted to lighting Bly's house on fire. Meanwhile, authorities launched a national manhunt for the Barksdales. They were captured about a month later in a hotel parking lot in Westchester, New York, where they were staying in an RV. While being extradited to Arizona on first-degree murder charges, the couple overpowered and kidnapped the guards who were tasked with watching over them during the drive. They locked the guards in the van and fled in a stolen car to southern Utah. U.S. Marshals captured the pair 2 weeks later in rural Arizona. Susan Barksdale was found to be the less culpable party and took a deal. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 5-year prison sentence. Blaine Barksdale admitted to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. He'll be released in 2041 at the age of 77. Number 3. Vincenzo Laporta. Italian mob boss Vincenzo Laporta is a member of the Camorra organization, one of the country's oldest Mafia-style crime groups. He went on the run in 2012 and was convicted in absentia of financial crimes. During his 11 years as a fugitive, Laporta was considered one of Italy's most dangerous wanted criminals. He was finally captured in 2023 after police spotted him celebrating an Italian soccer victory in a photo that was taken on the Greek island of Corfu. Prosecutors issued a warrant for Laporta's arrest, and officers took him into custody after he tried to flee from law enforcement on his scooter. According to authorities, he had built a whole new life in Greece, where he worked as a chef and had started a family. He kept a low profile, but was unable to contain his excitement over his hometown soccer team's first major victory in 33 years. And it was ultimately what did him in. Laporta's lawyer told the press that his client does not want to be extradited to Italy and that he plans to fight to remain in Greece. Meanwhile, Italian officials are urging for the extradition request to be granted so Laporta can be sent back to Italy, where he faces a 14-year prison sentence. Number 2. Dion Pelzer. In February 2023, 75-year-old David McDonald was found murdered in his apartment in Boston. An intruder had entered through the front door, which the senior citizen left unlocked so he could receive visitors and food deliveries without having to get up. The suspect slashed McDonald's throat, ate his food, and slept on the living room sofa before leaving with the victim's wallet, credit cards, and keys. Surveillance footage showed the killer arriving at the apartment building around 9:30 p.m. He could be seen turning the doorknobs of various apartments until he found one that was unlocked and leaving about 12 hours later. Based on the evidence, investigators identified the suspect as 30-year-old Dion Pelzer, who was wanted for allegedly assaulting someone with a knife in Brooklyn, New York. Police arrested him at a hospital in Boston while responding to a report that he was causing a disturbance. In addition to the charges out of New York, Pelzer faces a murder charge in Massachusetts. He's being held without bail while he awaits the next steps in his case. Number 1. Syed Sam Husseini. 36-year-old Dejan Dimitrovsky was tortured and murdered at his home in Perth, Australia in 2017. Investigators believe he was killed over a drug debt and identified his friend Syed Sam Husseini as one of 5 suspects in the case. But before authorities could take Husseini into custody on a murder charge, he fled to Afghanistan using his brother's passport. Fast forward 4 years to 2021. US forces were leaving Afghanistan after a 20-year presence in the country, and the government was falling to the Taliban. People were fleeing in droves, and Husseini, who holds dual citizenship in Australia and Afghanistan, was among many who flocked to the Kabul airport, desperately hoping to catch a flight out. Suddenly returning to Australia to face a murder charge didn't seem like the worst thing in the world, and he was probably regretting his decision to flee to Afghanistan in the first place. Luckily, he managed to obtain clearance with the help of his lawyer and was permitted to board an evacuation flight back to Australia. His return came just months after his 4 accomplices went on trial for murder. 2 suspects were convicted of manslaughter and received 9 and 10-year prison sentences, while another defendant was sentenced to 4 years for being an accessory after the fact. The 4th suspect was acquitted. Husseini was accused of being the main instigator in the case and faced a potential lifetime behind bars if convicted. The current status of the case is unclear. Attorney Glenn Colomates, who was not involved in Husseini's case but was helping people flee Afghanistan, told 9 News that life in an Australian prison was preferable to facing the Taliban's version of justice. At the time, the Taliban was allegedly burning the passports of dual nationals who were trying to leave the country. Husseini was indeed lucky to get out of there, even at the risk of losing his freedom to a murder conviction. Thanks for watching. If you had to choose, would you rather serve a 15-year prison sentence in a foreign country or avoid prison time in the country you grew up in and/or where most of your friends and family live by agreeing to leave and never return? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.